The massive city walls of Castiglione Fiorentino and the imposing fortification of its Cassero are testimony to its noted role as a medieval centre. However, only recent archaeological discoveries have revealed its importance as a still more ancient stronghold of the Valley of Chiana. The development of this site over the centuries was favoured by its strategic geographic location. It held natural control over various routes, both north-south along the Arezzo-Cortona-Chiusi axis and east-west connecting the Valley of Chiana and the Tiber Valley. The territory was certainly highly desired and contested by major centres. The area, now known to have been occupied since the prehistoric period, seems to have reached its greatest splendour between the 5th and 2nd centuries BC. A gate and segments of a city wall from this period are still found at the base of the later medieval wall. Since 1991, archaeological investigations in the Piazzale del Cassero have brought foundations of temple structures to light. The archaeological strata, inside and outside these foundations, have produced materials extending from the end of the 6th century to the 2nd century BC. Two important phases of the sanctuary can be identified. The first, between the end of the 5th century BC and the beginning of the 4th century BC, is represented by important discoveries of decorative architectural material from the temple roof. The materials brought to light have permitted the extensive reconstruction exhibited in this room, as well as our virtual reconstruction. Exhibits of excavated artifacts represent the second phase, linked to the Hellenistic period of the 2nd century BC. The temple was probably constructed on a stone podium, with an open central cell and two lateral cells, likely walled. In effect, it was much like the plan described by the Latin writer Vitruvio in his work De Architectura. An entrance stairway would have led up to the central cell. This area of the excavation is still under exploration, and therefore the reconstruction is still somewhat hypothetical, as are the 4 columns located in 2 rows in the proneo. Etruscan temples, as testified by a variety of archaeological sites, were richly decorated in terracotta architectural elements, painted in vivid colors. Their principal function was to cover and protect the wooden bearing structure of the roof. The Cassero temple must have followed the norm. At the front of the roof, and probably also in the back, there were cornices decorated in terracotta relief work. The peak of each extremity of the roof terminated in the head of a gorgon, with a round, menacing face. A long, hanging tongue extruded from the grimacing face of the gorgon, while her curling hair suggested serpents. In this case, the evil, menacing gaze of this famous, mythical monster raised the message, "Stay away," to an exalted level. The rest of the cornice was produced in repeated pressed terracotta motifs. The decoration was composed of a braid of lilies and rosebuds, twining horizontally above and below a central vine. There are still traces of the original colors, red for the rosebuds and white for the lilies, on a background that was probably sky blue. The upper edge of the cornice terminated in a border of small discs, on which were originally inserted points worked in metal, possibly bronze. This assemblage had the same function as modern anti-pigeon installations. The portion projecting below the cornice, visible to those who passed the entrance of the structure, was decorated with a continuous frieze of alternating stylized palm leaves and lotus flowers in red and black colors on a white background. Immediately behind the cornice began the wooden rafters and central beam that formed the framework of the roof. Large terracotta roof tiles were positioned on top of the framework, fixed by large iron nails that passed through to the rafters. Each nail hole was raised on a small bump that discouraged water from finding the channel to the wood below. The cap tiles of the bottom row on each side of the roof were closed at the front by figures of anthropomorphic lions' heads. The muzzle was portrayed resting on the front paws, with the tongue projecting from the mouth, giving the overall impression of the lion crouching. These figures had a double function, both decorative and protective, and were colored in red with black details for the eyes and nose. The spine of the roof, covering the central beam, was made of large cap tiles that were shorter and higher than those extending down the sides of the roof. Etruscan temples generally had decorative elements of various types, such as half-moons or terracotta statues on the central part of the roof. In the timpano, the frontal triangle below the roof and above the end walls, there was often a scene related to the divinity to which the temple was dedicated. Neither of these has been shown in the virtual reconstruction, since no findings have yet permitted their identification, but one should realize that they were certainly present.